I'm Gage, 34 years old, and a software engineer who's done pretty well for himself. My relationship with my sister Karen and Mom has always been tense, especially around money. Living single with a comfortable six-figure salary gives me freedom, but apparently also makes me the family ATM. When my 16-year-old niece Mia texted asking for $1,800 for prom, I stared at my phone in disbelief. Little did I know my response would ignite a family war. Let me know where you're watching from in the comments. Hit that like button and subscribe to hear how one text message changed everything in my family forever. To understand why this situation hit me so hard, you need to know about my family history. My father passed away when I was just 6 years old. He was a construction worker who suffered a fatal accident on site, leaving my mother alone to raise 2 children. Karen, my sister, is 7 years older than me. Even before Dad died, she was always the golden child, the one who got the praise, the attention, and the expectations. After his death, that dynamic only intensified. Mom worked 2 jobs to keep us afloat, which I respect immensely. She was a nurse by day and waitress at night. But her absence meant Karen essentially became my caretaker from a young age. Instead of creating a bond between us, this responsibility bred resentment. Karen never let me forget that she had to sacrifice parts of her teenage years to look after her little brother. Growing up, everything was a comparison. Why can't you get grades like your sister Karen never gave me this much trouble? Look how responsible Karen Island. It was exhausting living in her shadow, especially when I was trying my best with little encouragement. Mom saw Karen as the responsible one, the one who would succeed, while I was just the problem child who needed to be managed. When Karen turned 20, she met Brian. 6 months later, they were married, and Mom was ecstatic. Brian came from what appeared to be a good family, had a decent job in sales, and promised to take care of Karen. What none of us realized at the time was that Brian was incredibly irresponsible with money. He talked a big game about investments and business opportunities, but most of his schemes fell through. Karen, desperate to maintain the appearance of success, never told Mom about their financial troubles. Meanwhile, I was determined to make something of myself. Unlike Karen, who had her college partially funded by Mom's savings from Dad's life insurance, I had to work for mine. By the time I was ready for college, that money was gone, spent primarily on Karen's education and wedding. I worked 20 hours a week stocking shelves at a local grocery store while maintaining a full course load in computer science. Summers weren't for relaxation. I worked 60-hour weeks to save for the upcoming school year. The real tension with Karen started during my sophomore year of college. She called me crying about how they couldn't make rent. Despite being a broke college student, I scraped together $600 to help them. That was the first of many emergencies where Karen needed financial assistance. Car repairs, medical bills, housing deposits, each time with the promise to pay me back, which never happened. After graduation, I landed a job at a tech startup that eventually took off. I worked 80-hour weeks, took risks, and built a reputation as a problem solver. 4 years in, our company was acquired by a larger tech firm, and my stock options became worth something substantial. For the first time in my life, I had financial security, all through my own hard work and determination. Karen and Brian's financial situation, however, continued to deteriorate. They bought a house they couldn't afford in an upscale neighborhood, leased luxury cars, and took lavish vacations, all while struggling to pay basic bills. Karen became increasingly creative with her reasons for needing money, and I became increasingly skeptical. Their daughter, my niece, Mia, was born when I was in college. I always tried to be a good uncle, sending birthday and Christmas presents, attending school events when I could. But I watched with growing concern as Mia was raised with no concept of financial responsibility. She got everything she wanted, regardless of whether her parents could afford it. New phones, designer clothes, expensive hobbies that would be abandoned after a month, all because Karen and Brian couldn't say no. They were raising her exactly how they lived, spending today and worrying about the consequences tomorrow. Mom remained oblivious to the reality of Karen's situation. In her eyes, Karen had done everything right. Married young, had a child, bought a nice house. I was the odd one out, focused on my career, unmarried, childless. When Karen complained to Mom about my reluctance to help out the family, Mom would call me delivering guilt trips about family obligation and how I should support my sister. Blood is thicker than water, Gage, she would say. You have more than enough. Why can't you help your sister when she needs it? What neither of them acknowledged was that I had helped repeatedly to the tune of thousands of dollars that disappeared into the black hole of Karen and Brian's mismanagement. Each time I gave them money, it wasn't solving a problem, it was enabling their lifestyle. And each time I tried to suggest budgeting or financial planning, I was dismissed as judgmental and controlling. The last straw came 3 years ago when Karen called about potentially losing their house. They were 3 months behind on their mortgage, and the bank was threatening foreclosure. I agreed to help on the condition they meet with a financial advisor and create a budget. They reluctantly agreed. I paid the outstanding amount, and Karen promised to get their finances in order. I even helped her set up automatic payments for their bills to ensure nothing would be missed again. 2 months later, I saw Karen post pictures of their family vacation to Cancun on social media. When I called her out on it, she became defensive, saying they needed the break after all the stress of nearly losing their house. That was when I decided no more handouts. I would be there for emotional support, for advice if they wanted it, but the Bank of Gage was officially closed. This led to more tension, more tearful calls from Karen, more lectures from Mom about how I was abandoning my family in their time of need. But I stood firm. I had worked too hard for what I had to watch it drain away because my sister and her husband refused to live within their means. That brings us to Mia, now 16, and fully indoctrinated into her parents' mindset that money grows on trees, specifically trees in Uncle Gage's backyard. Looking back, I should have seen this request coming, but somehow I still found myself unprepared for the audacity of it. It was a Tuesday afternoon, and I was deep into debugging a complex algorithm at work when my phone buzzed with a text message. Normally, I wouldn't check personal messages during focus time, but something told me to look. The notification showed it was from Mia, which was unusual enough to catch my attention. We weren't in the habit of texting regularly. I opened the message and had to read it twice to make sure I wasn't misunderstanding. Hi, Uncle Gage. So prom is coming up next month, and I found the perfect dress, but it's $1,200. Mom says we're on a budget, but I know you can help. Also need about $600 for the limo and after party. Can you send the money this week? Thanks so much, love you. No, how are you? No pleasantries, just a direct request for $1,800, as if she was asking to borrow a pencil. The casual entitlement in her message left me momentarily speechless. I put my phone down and took a deep breath, trying to process what had just happened. My mind flashed back to my own senior prom 12 years ago. I had saved for months from my grocery store job to afford a second-hand tuxedo rental and to chip in for a shared limo with 5 other guys. My date and I went Dutch on dinner at a moderately priced restaurant before the dance. The entire night cost me about $300, which was still a significant amount for me at the time, but I had earned every penny myself. Now here was Mia asking for 6 times that amount without a second thought. The dress alone cost more than 4 times what I had spent on my entire prom experience. And she wasn't asking her parents, who should be the ones handling such expenses, if they could afford them. She was coming straight to me, bypassing them entirely. After taking a few minutes to calm down, I decided to respond with what I hoped was wisdom rather than anger. I didn't want to shame her, but I also refused to enable the entitled behavior that her parents had cultivated. Mia, I appreciate you thinking of me, but I think this is a great opportunity for you to learn something valuable. When I went to prom, I worked and saved for months to pay for it myself. The experience meant so much more because I earned it. You're capable of doing the same. You could get a weekend job, babysit, or do odd jobs around the neighborhood. There are also beautiful dresses for a fraction of that price. I'd be happy to help you make a budget and plan how to earn what you need, but I won't simply send the money. Earn it. I reread my message several times before sending, making sure it came across as supportive rather than preachy. I genuinely believed this could be a teachable moment for Mia, a chance to experience the pride that comes from working toward a goal and achieving it through personal effort. 3 minutes later, my phone buzzed again. Mia's response was swift and harsh. Wow, I can't believe you're being so stingy. Everyone knows you have tons of money. Mom was right, you just don't care about family. Whatever, I'll ask Grandma instead. The message felt like a slap in the face. not just because of the accusation that I was stingy, but because it revealed so much about what was being said about me in my absence. Karen had clearly been painting me as some kind of heartless miser who hoarded wealth while family members suffered. And my mother, who should have been teaching Mia better values, was apparently the backup plan for extravagant requests. I felt a complex mix of emotions: hurt that my family viewed me as nothing more than a wallet, anger that my sister was poisoning her daughter's mind against me, disappointment that my 16-year-old niece had such distorted values, and beneath it all, a deep sadness that money had become the primary lens through which my family relationships were viewed. Despite my better judgment, I felt compelled to respond once more. Mia, this isn't about being stingy. It's about helping you develop self-reliance and an appreciation for the value of money. Those are skills that will serve you well throughout your life. I care about you too much to deprive you of the opportunity to learn them. My offer to help you plan and budget stands. She didn't reply. I tried to return to my work but found it impossible to concentrate. My mind kept circling back to the exchange, wondering if I had been too harsh, if there was a better way I could have handled it. Part of me wanted to just send the money to avoid the conflict I knew was coming, but a stronger part knew that would be the wrong lesson to teach. By 5 o'clock, I had made little progress on my actual work. I packed up my laptop and headed home early, stopping at the gym on the way to work off some of the frustration. As I pushed through a punishing workout, I kept thinking about how differently my sister and I had turned out despite coming from the same household. She had embraced entitlement and immediate gratification, while I had learned the value of hard work and delayed reward. Now those divergent values were creating a canyon between us that seemed impossible to bridge. I was just stepping out of the shower when the real storm hit. Little did I know Mia's text was just the opening salvo in what would become a full-scale family war. My phone rang just as I was pulling on a t-shirt after my shower. Karen's name flashed on the screen and I felt a knot form in my stomach. Here we go, I thought. Taking a deep breath, I answered the call. How dare you? Karen's voice was shrill, not even bothering with a greeting. How dare you make my daughter feel like garbage? Hello to you too, Karen, I said, trying to keep my tone level. I didn't make Mia feel like garbage. I offered to help her learn how to earn money for her prom. She's 16 years old, Gage. She shouldn't have to work for basic high school experiences. Do you have any idea how you've hurt her? She's been crying in her room for the past hour. I sat down on the edge of my bed, rubbing my temple where a headache was beginning to form. Karen, $1,800 for prom is not a basic high school experience. That's extravagant by any standard. And yes, at 16, learning the value of work is exactly what she should be doing. Oh, that's rich coming from you, Karen spat. Mr. Silicon Valley success story. You think because you worked hard, everyone else should struggle too. Some of us weren't given the opportunities you had. I nearly choked on the absurdity of her statement. The opportunities I had. Karen, are you serious right now? You had college partially paid for. I worked through school. You had mom's emotional support. I had constant criticism. What exactly are these magical opportunities you think I was given? You got to focus solely on your career without responsibilities. No husband, no child, nothing but your precious job. Must be nice to be so selfish. The conversation was rapidly deteriorating, and I struggled to maintain my composure. My life choices aren't selfish, they're just different from yours. And they're certainly not relevant to whether your daughter should expect her uncle to shell out nearly $2,000 for one night of partying. You owe this family, Gage. Karen's voice turned cold. After everything we did for you growing up, what exactly did you do for me, Karen? Besides, resent my existence. I practically raised you. While Mom was working herself to the bone to keep a roof over our heads, I was the one making sure you did your homework, had dinner, got to school on time. I gave up my teenage years for you. And I'm grateful for that, I said, genuinely meaning it. But that doesn't entitle you to unlimited access to my bank account forever. Especially not for something as unnecessary as an obscenely expensive prom dress. Karen was quiet for a moment, and when she spoke again, her voice had that manipulative sweetness that I'd come to recognize as a warning sign. Look, Gage, Mia has her heart set on this dress. All her friends are going all out for prom. I don't want her to feel left out. Can't you just do this one thing for her? For me? For family? I've done many one things for you over the years, Karen. Thousands of dollars worth of one things that were never repaid or even acknowledged. But this isn't about the money. It's about the principle. Mia needs to learn that money doesn't just appear on demand. Pay or you're cut off. Karen's voice turned cold again, all pretense of sweetness gone. I mean it, Gage. If you don't send the money by tomorrow, don't expect to be part of this family anymore. The threat hit like a physical blow. Despite our differences, despite the tension and resentment, they were still my family. The thought of being cut off completely left a hollow feeling in my chest. Are you seriously threatening to disown me over a prom dress? I asked, my voice quiet. This isn't about the dress. This is about years of you looking down on us, judging our choices, acting like you're better than everyone. The dress is just the last straw. Before I could respond, Karen hung up. I sat there, phone in hand, feeling like I'd been hit by a truck. The unfairness of her accusations stung. But what hurt more was the realization that this was how my sister truly saw me, not as someone who had worked hard to overcome obstacles, but as someone who had been given advantages and now lorded to them over everyone else. I barely had time to process the conversation with Karen when my phone rang again. This time it was my mother. I briefly considered not answering, but knew that would only make things worse. Gage, what is this I hear about you? Refusing to help Mia with her prom. Mom's voice held that familiar tone of disappointment that had been the soundtrack of my childhood. Hello, Mom. Nice to hear from you too. I'm doing well, thanks for asking, I said, unable to keep the sarcasm from my voice. Don't get smart with me, young man. Karen just called me in tears. How could you be so cruel to your niece? I wasn't cruel, Mom. Mia asked me for $1,800 for prom. I told her that was excessive and offered to help her learn how to earn money and budget instead. Gage, you know, your sister struggles financially. Why are you being so difficult? You've got more than enough money. There it was again, the assumption that my financial stability somehow obligated me to bankroll everyone else's poor decisions. My financial situation isn't the point, Mom. The point is teaching Mia responsible values. Don't lecture me about values, Gage. I raised you both with good values. Karen is doing her best as a mother, and if you had children of your own, you'd understand how important it is to give them the best experiences possible. Even when those experiences cost nearly $2,000 that her parents can't afford, how is teaching her to spend beyond her means a good value? It's her senior prom, Gage. It's a once-in-a-lifetime event. Every girl deserves to feel special. I took a deep breath, trying a different approach. Mom, when I was in high school, did you give me $1,800 for prom? There was a pause. That was different. We didn't have that kind of money then. Exactly. And I still had a great time because I worked and saved for it myself. That's all I'm suggesting Mia do. You always were stubborn, Mom sighed. Just like your father. He never understood the importance of family either. The comparison to my father, especially framed as a criticism, ignited a spark of anger. Dad worked himself to death, providing for this family. Don't you dare suggest he didn't understand family importance. Well, you're certainly following in his footsteps, working all the time, no wife, no children, and now pushing away the family you do have over money. This isn't about money, I was nearly shouting now. This is about responsibility and reasonable expectations. Why am I the bad guy for not wanting to spoil Mia rotten? Because you're being selfish, Gage. Plain and simple. Karen is right, you've changed. Success has made you forget where you came from and who was there for you. If you can't do this small thing for your niece, then maybe you aren't the son I thought I raised. The call ended with my mother's disappointment hanging heavy in the air. I tossed my phone onto the bed and paced my apartment, a mixture of rage and hurt churning inside me. How had I become the villain in this story? When did having boundaries and promoting responsibility become character flaws? The worst part was the seed of doubt their words had planted. Was I being unreasonable? Had success changed me? Was I being stingy just to prove a point? No, I decided. This wasn't about the money. It never had been. This was about principles, about teaching values that would serve Mia well in life. If that made me the bad guy in my family's eyes, then so be it. Sometimes doing the right thing meant being misunderstood. What I didn't realize then was that the situation was about to get much more complicated, and the true nature of my family's financial entanglement with me was about to be revealed. After those explosive phone calls, I couldn't settle. My apartment felt too quiet, too empty, a stark contrast to the emotional chaos swirling inside me. I poured myself a glass of bourbon neat and sat at my kitchen counter, replaying the conversations in my head. Karen's threat of cutting me off from the family echoed painfully. Despite our differences, I'd always held on to the hope that someday we might repair our relationship. Now that possibility seemed to be slipping away over a prom dress of all things. As I sipped my drink, something Karen had said during one of our previous financial emergencies resurfaced in my memory. About 3 years ago, when she called about potentially losing their house, she'd mentioned something specific about their mortgage payment, a figure that had seemed oddly high, even for their upscale neighborhood, $2,200 monthly. Why was that figure suddenly bothering me? I pulled out my laptop and logged into my bank account, something tugging at the back of my mind. I rarely scrutinized my recurring payments, trusting in the automatic systems I'd set up to manage my finances. Most of my bills were fairly consistent, and I had enough buffer in my accounts that small fluctuations never caused problems. I navigated to the recurring payments section and scrolled through the list: internet utilities, subscriptions, charitable donations, retirement contributions, and then I saw it. A monthly payment of $2,200 to Homestead Mortgage Services scheduled to withdraw on the 1st of every month for the past 3 years. I stared at the screen, confusion giving way to dawning horror. I had no mortgage. I owned my condo outright, having paid cash for it after the company acquisition. This wasn't my payment, it was Karen's. With shaking hands, I pulled up the payment history. 36 payments of $2,200 each, totaling $79,200 over 3 years. Money that had been silently flowing from my account to pay for my sister's mortgage without my knowledge or consent. The memory came back in full force now. 3 years ago, when Karen and Brian were facing foreclosure, I had helped them set up automatic payments to ensure they wouldn't miss another mortgage payment. Karen had been at my place looking over my shoulder as I logged into my accounts and showed her how to set up recurring payments. She must have somehow added her mortgage to my payment list when I wasn't looking, or perhaps afterward using my saved login. The betrayal cut deep. This wasn't a one-time request for help or even occasional financial assistance. This was systematic theft, month after month, year after year, without my knowledge. And all the while, Karen had continued to ask for additional money for emergencies, knowing full well she was already taking thousands from me monthly. I dug deeper, pulling up my credit card statements from the past few years. Sure enough, there were charges I didn't recognize, mostly from department stores, spas, and restaurants in Karen's area. She had added herself as an authorized user on one of my credit cards, probably during that same visit, and had been using it sparingly enough that the charges blended in with my regular expenses. The total financial damage was staggering. Between the mortgage payments and credit card charges, Karen had taken well over $80,000 from me over the past 3 years. No wonder she could afford lavish vacations and luxury items while claiming financial hardship. She had been supplementing their lifestyle with my money all along. And now she had the audacity to demand $1,800 for Mia's prom, threatening to cut me off from the family if I refused. The irony would have been laughable if it wasn't so painful. I spent the next hour compiling evidence, taking screenshots, making notes of dates and amounts. Part of me wanted to call Karen immediately and confront her with what I'd discovered, but I knew that conversation would be better had when I wasn't burning with fresh anger. Instead, I called my bank's 24-hour service line. After verifying my identity, I explained the situation to the representative, who was appropriately horrified. She helped me cancel the recurring mortgage payment immediately and flagged my account for suspicious activity. She also helped me report the unauthorized credit card use and initiate the process to get a new card issued with a different number. "Sir, you may want to consider filing a police report," the representative suggested gently. "This is financial fraud." The thought of filing charges against my own sister made my stomach churn despite her betrayal. "I'll consider it," I said, knowing I probably wouldn't follow through. Despite everything, she was still family, and the thought of Karen potentially facing legal consequences was more than I could bear. After hanging up with the bank, I sat in stunned silence, trying to process the magnitude of what had happened. The sense of violation was profound. This wasn't just about money, it was about trust, about taking advantage of someone who had already given so much. I thought about all the times Karen had guilted me for not helping enough, for being stingy with my extra money, all while secretly draining my accounts to fund the lifestyle she felt entitled to. The audacity was breathtaking. I thought about my mother too, her unwavering support of Karen, her constant criticism of my life choices. Did she know about this arrangement? Was she complicit in the deception, or just another victim of Karen's manipulative behavior? As the night wore on, my shock and hurt began to crystallize into resolve. This had to stop, not just the financial drain, but the entire dysfunctional dynamic. For too long I had allowed myself to be manipulated, guilted, and now stolen from, all in the name of family obligation. By the time I finally went to bed, it was nearly 2 a.m. I had canceled the mortgage autopay, reported the fraudulent credit card use, changed all my financial passwords, and set up additional security measures on my accounts. The immediate bleeding had been stopped. What I hadn't decided yet was how to confront Karen and the rest of my family with what I'd discovered. That would require a level of emotional preparation I wasn't capable of in my current state. For now, I had done what was necessary to protect myself financially. The emotional reckoning would have to wait until morning. As I drifted into an uneasy sleep, I wondered what Karen's reaction would be when the mortgage payment didn't go through. Would she panic? Would she immediately know I had discovered her scheme? Or would she try to maintain the charade, perhaps coming up with another emergency to explain why she suddenly needed $2,200? One thing was certain: by 8 o'clock the next morning, the carefully constructed house of cards that Karen had built on my unwitting financial support was going to come crashing down. And despite everything, a small, vindictive part of me was looking forward to it. I barely slept that night. My mind kept churning with thoughts of betrayal, anger, and the upcoming confrontation. When my alarm went off at 6:30, I had already been staring at the ceiling for an hour, rehearsing what I would say when the inevitable call came. I went through my morning routine, mechanically brewing coffee stronger than usual, knowing I would need the extra caffeine to get through what promised to be an exhausting day. I considered calling in sick to work, but decided against it. The structure and distraction of my job might be the only thing keeping me sane today. At exactly 8:05, as I was walking into my office building, my phone rang. Karen's name flashed on the screen right on cue. I took a deep breath and answered. Karen's voice was frantic, bordering on hysterical. "Something's wrong with our mortgage payment. The bank just called and said it was declined. Our payment is late, and they're threatening late fees. I don't understand what happened." I remained silent for a moment, letting her panic hang in the air. "I canceled the automatic payment last night," I finally said, my voice calm and controlled. "You? What?" The confusion in her voice quickly turned to anger. "Why would you do that? You know we need that payment to go through." "Yes, Karen, I know. What I'm curious about is why you thought it was appropriate to set up your mortgage to be paid from my account without my knowledge or consent for the past 3 years." The line went silent. I could almost hear her mind racing, trying to formulate an explanation or excuse. I don't know what you're talking about," she stammered, but her voice lacked conviction. "Don't insult my intelligence, Karen. I have the bank records, 36 payments of $2,200 each. That's $79,200 you've stolen from me, not to mention the unauthorized charges on my credit card." Another long pause. Then her voice shifted from defensive to pleading. "Gage, you don't understand. We were desperate. After you helped us with the foreclosure, things were still tight. It was just supposed to be temporary until Brian's commission structure improved. We were going to pay you back, I swear." "When, Karen? When were you going to pay me back? After taking vacations to Cancun, After buying new cars, after spending hundreds on clothes and spa days using my credit card, you've been living beyond your means on my dime for years, and Balfour, all the while making me feel guilty for not helping enough. Please, Gage. Her voice cracked, tears evident now. We can't lose the house. The payment is already late. The bank will charge fees. It will affect our credit score. Can't you just let this one payment go through while we figure something out? The manipulation was so transparent it was almost painful. After being caught stealing tens of thousands of dollars, her concern was still for the immediate problem, not the massive breach of trust. No, Karen. Not this time. The Bank of Gage is permanently closed. You can't do this to us. Her tone shifted abruptly from pleading to threatening. What about Mia? Do you want your niece to be homeless? Is that what you want? Don't you dare use Mia as a shield, Karen. You did this, not me. You and Brian created this situation with your dishonesty and financial irresponsibility. And now you're facing the consequences. Mom was right about you, Karen spat. You don't care about anyone but yourself. You're heartless. Interesting perspective, from someone who's been secretly stealing from me for years. The call ended with Karen sobbing and cursing me. I stood outside my office building, hands shaking slightly as I pocketed my phone. Despite my outward composure during the call, the confrontation had left me emotionally raw. I had barely made it to my desk when my phone rang again. This time it was Brian. I braced myself and answered. What the hell is your problem, man? Brian's voice was aggressive, accusatory. Karen is devastated. How could you pull the rug out from under us like this? Hello, Brian. Nice of you to join the conversation. Tell me, were you aware that your mortgage has been coming out of my account for the past 3 years? There was a brief hesitation. Look, that was Karen's idea, not mine. I told her it wasn't right, but we were in a tough spot. The ease with which he threw his wife under the bus told me everything I needed to know about Brian's character, and yet you were happy to benefit from it. To live in a house you couldn't afford, drive cars beyond your means, take vacations you didn't earn. That's not fair, man. I work hard. So do millions of people who live within their means, Brian. Working hard doesn't entitle you to steal. His tone changed, becoming conciliatory. Look, Gage, I get that you're upset. You have every right to be. But we're talking about your sister, your niece, family. Can't we work something out? Maybe we pay you back a little each month. You've had 3 years to work something out, Brian. 3 years of knowing you were taking my money without permission. Why should I believe anything would change now? Because we're desperate, man. The bank is going to come after us. We could lose everything. Then I suggest you start looking for a more affordable place to live. Get rid of the least luxury cars, and learn to budget like the rest of us. Your financial problems are not my responsibility. Brian continued to alternate between threats, guilt trips, and pleas for the next 10 minutes, but I remained firm. By the time I hung up, I felt emotionally drained but resolute. For the first time in years, I wasn't giving in to their manipulation. I had barely gotten back to work when my phone rang a third time. My mother. I considered letting it go to voicemail, but knew that would only postpone the inevitable. How could you do this? To your sister? Mom's voice was shaking with anger. She called me hysterical, saying you're trying to make them homeless out of spite. Did she happen to mention that she's been stealing from me for the past 3 years, Mom? That she set up her mortgage to be paid from my account, without my knowledge or permission? There was a pause. What are you talking about? Either Mom was genuinely in the dark, or she was a better actor than I gave her credit for. I explained the situation in detail, including the unauthorized credit card charges and the total amount Karen had taken from me over the years. That can't be right, Mom said, but her voice had lost some of its certainty. Karen wouldn't do something like that. I have the bank records, Mom. 36 payments of $2,200 each, plus thousands in credit card charges. This isn't a misunderstanding or an accident. This was deliberate and sustained financial fraud. Mom was quiet for a long moment. Even if what you're saying is true, you can't just cut them off without warning. They have a child, Gage, your niece. I'm aware of that, Mom, and I feel terrible that Mia is caught in the middle of this. But continuing to enable Karen and Brian's financial irresponsibility isn't helping anyone, least of all Mia. They need to learn to live within their means and take responsibility for their choices. So you're just going to let them lose their house? What kind of brother does that? The guilt trip was so predictable it almost made me laugh. The kind who's tired of being stolen from and manipulated, Mom. The kind who's finally setting boundaries after years of enabling destructive behavior. The conversation continued in circles, with Mom alternating between disbelief about Karen's actions and criticism of my response. By the end, she seemed resigned, if not supportive of my position, agreeing that Karen and Brian needed to face reality, but still pleading for me to find a more gradual solution that wouldn't destroy their lives overnight. I hung up feeling exhausted but strangely light, as if a weight I hadn't fully acknowledged had been lifted from my shoulders. The confrontations had been painful, but necessary. For the first time in years, I had stood my ground without wavering, without giving in to the guilt and manipulation that had characterized our family dynamic for so long. My phone buzzed again in the late afternoon. This time, surprisingly, it was a text from Mia. Mom and Dad are fighting really bad. Mom is crying and Dad keeps yelling about money. Grandma is here too. They think I can't hear, but I can. What's going on, Uncle Gage? My heart sank. Mia was innocent in all this, caught in the crossfire of her parents' financial dishonesty and my reaction to it. She deserved better than to be shielded from reality with lies, but she also deserved better than to be traumatized by adult problems. I called her rather than texting back, stepping out of my office for privacy. When she answered, her voice was small and scared. Uncle Gage, are we going to lose our house? I don't know, sweetheart, I said honestly. That depends on what your parents decide to do next. But I want you to know that whatever happens, it's not your fault, and you're going to be okay. Mom said you cut us off because you're mad about the prom money. I sighed, unsurprised that Karen would try to shift the blame. That's not exactly what happened, Mia. There's a lot more to it, adult stuff that's been building for a long time. But I want you to know that I love you, and I'm not angry at you. Then why won't you help us? Don't you care if we're homeless? The question cut deep, but I knew I had to be truthful without burdening her with the full, ugly reality. I care very much, Mia. But sometimes helping means letting people solve their own problems, even when it's hard. Your parents have options, they just might not be the easy ones they want. We talked for nearly 20 minutes. I didn't trash her parents, but I was honest about the importance of financial responsibility and living within one's means. I explained how working for things gives them more value than having them handed to you. By the end of the call, Mia seemed calmer, though still confused and worried. If you want to talk about prom again, I meant what I said before I told her before we hung up. I'd be happy to help you figure out how to earn money for a dress you love. Not $1,200, but something beautiful that you can be proud you worked for. I'll think about it, she said, her voice thoughtful rather than dismissive. As I ended the call, I felt a mix of emotions. Guilt that Mia was caught in this mess, anger at Karen and Brian for their deception, exhaustion from the emotional toll of the day. But beneath it all was a quiet certainty that despite the pain and conflict, I had done the right thing. For the first time in years, I was refusing to be the enabler, the safety net, the silent victim of my family's dysfunction. The reckoning had only just begun, but already I could feel something shifting both within me and within the toxic family dynamic that had persisted for too long. Whatever came next would be difficult but necessary for all of us. A week passed with minimal contact from my family. Karen attempted to call several times, but I let the calls go to voicemail, not yet ready for another emotionally charged conversation. Her messages alternated between tearful apologies and thinly veiled guilt trips, neither of which I was prepared to engage with. My mother called daily, her tone gradually shifting from accusatory to concerned as the reality of Karen's deception sank in. Finally, I decided it was time to face the situation head-on. I texted my mother suggesting a family meeting at her house the following Saturday. Everyone needed to be there: Mom, Karen, Brian, Mia, and myself. To my surprise, everyone agreed, though Karen's response was terse, and Brian didn't respond at all. That Saturday morning, I drove to my childhood home with a mixture of dread and determination. I had spent the week consulting with a financial advisor and preparing documentation of everything Karen had taken without permission. I wasn't looking to shame her publicly, but I needed everyone to understand the gravity of what had happened. When I arrived, everyone was already there, seated awkwardly in the living room. Mom looked tired with new worry lines creasing her forehead. Karen's eyes were puffy from crying, and she couldn't meet my gaze. Brian sat with his arms crossed defensively, while Mia perched uncomfortably on the arm of the sofa, clearly wishing she could be anywhere else. "Thank you all for coming," I began, taking the only empty seat. "I know this is difficult, but we need to have an honest conversation about what's been happening." "We know you're angry, Gage," Karen interrupted, her voice strained. "But you're destroying this family out of spite. Is that what you want?" "What I want is for us to deal with reality, Karen. The reality that you've been systematically taking money from me, without my knowledge or consent, for years. The reality that you and Brian have been living beyond your means and expecting others to foot the bill. The reality that this pattern has to stop, not just for my sake, but for all of yours, too." Brian scoffed. "Easy for you to say with your fancy job and no responsibilities." "My job didn't fall into my lap, Brian. I worked for it. And as for responsibilities, I take mine seriously, including the responsibility to manage my finances ethically, something you and Karen seem to have forgotten." Mom raised her hands placatingly. "Please, can we keep this civil? We're here to find a solution, not to attack each other." "You're right, Mom." I took a deep breath. "I'm not here to attack anyone, but I do need everyone to understand what's been happening." I pulled out the folder I had prepared and laid out the documentation, bank statements, showing the mortgage payments, credit card statements, with Karen's unauthorized charges, a spreadsheet totaling the amount taken over 3 years. $79,200 in mortgage payments, nearly $12,000 in credit card charges. That's over $90,000 taken without my knowledge or permission over 3 years. The room fell silent as everyone absorbed the figures. Even Mia leaned forward to look at the papers, her eyes widening at the amounts. "I was going to pay you back," Karen said weakly. "It was just supposed to be temporary." "When, Karen, you've had 3 years. In that time, you've taken vacations, bought new cars, spent hundreds on clothes and luxury items. Where was the money to pay me back going to come from?" Karen's face crumpled. "I don't know. I thought things would get better. Brian's commission structure was supposed to improve. We were going to refinance the house." "The truth is," Brian said, his defensive posture finally cracking, "we're in way deeper than you know, Gage. The mortgage is just the tip of the iceberg. We've got credit card debt, personal loans, second mortgage. We're underwater on both cars." Mom gasped. "Brian, what are you saying? How bad is it?" Brian ran a hand through his hair, looking suddenly older and defeated. "We're about $400,000 in debt, all told. The house is worth less than we owe on it. The interest payments alone are killing us each month. Without Gage's help with the mortgage, we're done." The revelation hung heavy in the room. $400,000 was a staggering amount, far worse than I had imagined. "How did it get this bad?" Mom asked, her voice barely above a whisper. Karen and Brian exchanged glances. "It just happened," Karen said, "a little at a time. A new car because Brian needed to impress clients. Home renovations because the neighbors were all upgrading. Vacations because we deserved a break from the stress. Clothes and activities for Mia because we didn't want her to feel different from her friends. And every time we got in deeper," Brian added, "we told ourselves it was temporary, that things would turn around, that next month, next year would be better." I looked at Mia, who was listening intently, her expression a mixture of confusion and dawning understanding. "This is why I responded the way I did about the prom money, Mia," I said gently. "It wasn't about being stingy. It was about trying to break this cycle of spending money that isn't there." Mia nodded slowly. "I get it now, I think. Mom and Dad have been pretending we're richer than we are." "That's a pretty accurate assessment," I said. "And it's a dangerous game to play because eventually reality catches up." "So what now?" Mom asked, looking between Karen, Brian, and me. "What happens next?" I took a deep breath. That depends on Karen and Brian. I'm willing to help, but not unconditionally, and not by enabling the same patterns that got us here. What kind of help? Karen asked cautiously. First, you need professional financial counseling. I've spoken with a financial advisor who specializes in debt management and recovery. She's willing to work with you to create a realistic plan. We can't afford a financial advisor, Brian objected. I'll cover the cost, I said, but only if you commit to following the plan she creates. That means full financial transparency, strict budgeting, and significant lifestyle changes. What kind of lifestyle changes? Karen asked, her voice small. For starters, you'll need to sell the house. It's too expensive for your income even without the underwater mortgage. You'll need to downsize significantly. The leased luxury cars will have to go to replaced with reliable used vehicles you can actually afford. No more vacations, designer clothes, or expensive extras until you're on solid financial footing. Karen began to cry softly. But this is our home, our life. It's a life built on quicksand, Karen, and it's collapsing. You can either make controlled changes now, or face forced changes when everything falls apart completely. Brian, surprisingly, was the first to nod. He's right, Karen. We can't keep doing this. We're one missed payment away from disaster, and now we know Gage isn't going to keep covering for us. What about Mia? Karen asked. How will this affect her? I turned to my niece. Mia, this will mean changes for you too. A new house, probably a new school, less expensive clothes and activities. But it also means learning valuable life skills about financial responsibility that will serve you well forever. Mia's eyes were bright, with unshed tears, but she nodded bravely. If it means not being homeless, I guess I can deal. You'll do more than deal, I assured her. You'll thrive, and I'll help you. That offer to help you earn money for a reasonable prom dress still stands. And I'd be happy to help you learn about saving, investing, and building real financial security. Mom had been quiet, taking everything in. Now she spoke up. I had no idea things were this bad. I feel partly responsible. I've been so focused on the appearances, on seeing you all living what looked like a successful life. I never questioned how you were affording it all. We're all responsible in different ways, I said. Me included. I should have set firmer boundaries years ago instead of enabling the situation. But now we have a chance to fix things, to build something healthier. The conversation continued for hours. There were more tears, more revelations, more hard truths. But by the end, a plan was beginning to take shape. Karen and Brian agreed to meet with the financial advisor. Mom offered her spare bedroom for Mia if things got really tight temporarily. And I committed to providing structured conditional help that would support their recovery without enabling further irresponsibility. As difficult as the conversation had been, I felt a weight lifting. For the first time in years, we were dealing with reality rather than living in denial. The road ahead would be challenging, but at least we were finally on a path that could lead to healing both financially and relationally. As we were preparing to leave, Mia approached me quietly. Uncle Gage, I've been thinking about what you said about earning money for prom. Do you really think I could earn enough in time? I smiled at her, seeing a glimmer of the responsible adult she could become with the right guidance. I absolutely do, Mia, and I'd be honored to help you figure out how. It wasn't a perfect resolution. There was still hurt, still tension, still a long road ahead. But as I drove home that evening, I felt something I hadn't felt in relation to my family for a very long time: hope. 6 months have passed since that confrontational family meeting, and the changes have been nothing short of remarkable. It hasn't been easy, not by any stretch of the imagination, but the progress we've all made, both individually and as a family, has been worth every difficult moment. Karen and Brian followed through on their commitment to meet with the financial advisor. The initial sessions were tough, laying bare the full extent of their financial mismanagement and forcing them to confront years of poor decisions. The advisor didn't sugarcoat anything, presenting them with a recovery plan that required significant lifestyle changes and would take years to fully implement. True to our agreement, they sold their house, taking a loss, but relieving themselves of the crushing mortgage payments. They moved into a modest 3-bedroom apartment in a different school district, one with reasonable rent that fit within their newly established budget. The luxury cars were returned to the leasing company, replaced by 2 used but reliable vehicles, purchased outright with a small loan I provided interest-bearing, and with a formal repayment schedule. Brian, to his credit, has stepped up in ways I never expected. He took on a second job on weekends to help accelerate their debt repayment, and has become meticulous about tracking expenses and sticking to their budget. Karen found work as an administrative assistant at a local medical office, contributing a steady income to the household for the first time in years. The additional income has been directed entirely toward debt repayment, not lifestyle enhancement. Perhaps the most significant change has been in their attitude toward money. No more magical thinking, no more assumptions that things will somehow work out without concrete plans. They now have weekly budget meetings, track every dollar, and have embraced a level of financial transparency that would have been unimaginable 6 months ago. Mia has shown remarkable resilience throughout this transition. The move to a new school was initially difficult, but she adapted quickly, making new friends who value her for who she is rather than what she has. True to my word, I helped her find part-time work as a weekend receptionist at a friend's tech company, a position that taught her valuable skills while allowing her to earn money for her prom and other expenses. Her prom experience ended up being very different from what she had initially envisioned, but in the best possible way. Instead of the $1,200 designer dress, she found a beautiful gown at a consignment shop for $150. She and her date, along with several friends, arranged for a parent to drive them instead of hiring a limo. They had dinner at a reasonably priced restaurant before the dance and attended a friend's supervised house party afterward. The pride in her voice when she called to tell me she had paid for everything herself was worth more than any amount of money I could have given her. It meant more because I earned it, she told me, echoing the very words I had tried to convey in that first text message exchange. My relationship with my mother has undergone its own transformation. The blinders of favoritism and denial have begun to fall away as she's witnessed the consequences of years of enabling Karen's behavior. We've had several heart-to-heart conversations about our family dynamic, about the different standards she held Karen and me to, about the way her well-intentioned protection of Karen actually hindered her growth and independence. I thought I was being a good mother by shielding her from difficulties Mom confessed during one of our talks. But I see now that I was actually preventing her from developing the strength and skills she needed. You had to develop those on your own, and I'm sorry I didn't support you the same way. Those words were healing balm on wounds I had carried for decades, validating feelings I had long suppressed for the sake of family harmony. Our relationship now is more honest, more balanced, and ultimately more loving than it has ever been. As for Karen and me, we're rebuilding our relationship one careful step at a time. The betrayal of trust was significant and complete. Healing will take time, but we're talking regularly now, having honest conversations about our childhood, our resentments, our misunderstandings of each other. For perhaps the first time in our adult lives, we're relating to each other as equals, not as the golden child and the afterthought, not as the financial success and the struggling sibling, but as two adults with different strengths and weaknesses trying to understand each other better. I've established a new tradition of weekly family financial literacy dinners at my place. Mom, Karen, Brian, and Mia all attend, and we discuss everything from basic budgeting to investment principles to the psychology of spending. These dinners have become about much more than money, though. They're about communication, about support, about building a healthier family dynamic based on honesty rather than appearances. The journey from hurt to healing hasn't been linear. There have been setbacks, arguments, moments of doubt. Karen and Brian still struggle sometimes with the lifestyle adjustments, occasionally slipping into old patterns of wanting more than they can afford. Mia has her moments of teenage resentment about the family's reduced circumstances. Mom sometimes falls back into old habits of making excuses for Karen's behavior. But the difference now is that we address these issues openly. No more secrets, no more pretending, no more enabling destructive patterns. We call each other out kindly but firmly when we see old behaviors resurfacing. And slowly, steadily, we're all becoming healthier, financially and emotionally. The experience has taught me profound lessons about the nature of true generosity. I had always equated helping family with giving them whatever they asked for, believing that saying no was selfish or uncaring. Now I understand that sometimes the most loving thing you can do is to set boundaries, to let people face the consequences of their choices, to offer guidance rather than bailouts. I've learned about the importance of financial transparency and the danger of avoiding difficult conversations about money. So many families consider money matters taboo, shrouding them in secrecy and shame. That silence created the perfect environment for dysfunction to flourish in our family. Breaking that silence, painful though it was the first essential step toward healing. Most importantly, I've learned that family relationships based on manipulation and obligation are inherently unhealthy. True family bonds must be built on mutual respect, honesty, and a genuine desire for each other's well-being, not just in the moment, but in the long term. As I look toward the future, I'm cautiously optimistic. Karen and Brian still have years of debt repayment ahead, but they're on a sustainable path now. Mia is developing financial skills and values that will serve her well throughout her life. Mom and I are enjoying a relationship that feels authentic for the first time. And I've found a new sense of peace, no longer torn between guilt and resentment, able to help my family in ways that promote growth rather than dependency. Sometimes you have to lose what you thought was important to find what truly matters. My family nearly fell apart over money, but in confronting that crisis, we discovered something far more valuable: honest communication, genuine accountability, and love that empowers rather than enables. The journey continues, but for the first time in a very long time, I'm grateful to be walking it with my family beside me. What difficult boundaries have you had to set with loved ones? Did they strengthen or damage your relationships in the long run? Share your experiences in the comments below. If this story resonated with you, please hit the like button and subscribe for more real-life stories about family finances and finding your way through difficult situations. Remember that sometimes the hardest conversations lead to the most meaningful connections. Thank you for listening to my story, and I wish you wisdom and courage in navigating your own family dynamics.